I used to think I had it all. A beautiful wife, a sweet daughter, a thriving company, and a peaceful home nestled in the quiet suburbs of Santa Rosa, where I planted every maple tree, every daisy bed along that white picket fence with my own hands. On Saturday mornings, when the sunlight lazily streamed through the kitchen window, my wife, Allison, would tie her hair back, pour me a hot cup of coffee, and our daughter, Emily, would sit cross-legged on the tall stool, munching on waffles and telling stories about school. Those were the moments I truly believed would last forever. But everything started changing with the smallest things. One evening, I got home late from a client meeting. I hoped to see Allison reading on the sofa, as always, but the living room was eerily quiet. The lights were on, the TV was still murmuring the evening news, but the seat was empty. On the table was a cold dinner plate. Not a single note. She came home eventually, eyes a little puffy, saying she was tired, had a long meeting at the paper. She muttered, not meeting my gaze. Then she walked straight upstairs. I stayed behind, under the warm yellow light, staring at that cold plate and asking myself, what had I just lost? Without even realizing it, from that night on, things just felt off. She started coming home later, cooked less, stopped hugging me from behind in the mornings like she used to in winter. Once, I reached for her hand during a movie, and she gently pulled away, as if my touch was suddenly unfamiliar. I didn't say anything, but inside, I could feel something cracking, something slow and invisible, but deep. I noticed how she did the dishes. Normally, Allison would sing along to Elton John while scrubbing away at the sink. But recently, she washed in silence. Her movements were quick, efficient, and every plate slammed down like she was angry at something, or someone. I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe work stress, maybe age, maybe life catching up to us. But then I realized, I was lying to myself. One Wednesday night, I decided to do something spontaneous. I picked up her favorite fish tacos from La Taqueria, the same place we used to go during our college days. I drove straight to the newsroom, Santa Rosa Press-Democrat, intending to surprise Allison with dinner at her desk. Like those married couples who were still busy but holding on to something warm. But the receptionist shook her head. Ms. Allison isn't in today. Sorry, you are? I froze. I'm her husband. I walked out of the building with the still warm paper bag in hand. But my hands were freezing. I wandered through the parking lot, not knowing what I was even looking for. My face stayed calm, but inside me, a storm had already begun. She lied. That night, I didn't mention the visit. Allison came home close to 10. Hair a little messy, wearing a perfume I didn't recognize. I was sitting on the front porch, watching her park. Long meeting, I said. Yeah, stressful, she replied, stepping inside quickly, like she didn't want to brush against me. I slept next to her that night. Our backs turned to each other. A space between us colder than any Northern California winter. I closed my eyes, but my mind kept replaying the image of that empty office chair, the receptionist's confused face, and the unbearable silence I brought home with me. The next morning, while she was showering, I looked at her phone. My hands trembled, my heart pounded, but there was nothing. No strange messages, no unusual call history. Either I was paranoid, or she was meticulous. I didn't confront her, I didn't accuse. I just stepped outside, into our backyard, and watered the hydrangeas she used to love most. The petals were still bright, but the roots, they were starting to rot. Just like our marriage. That same day, I called Rick, my old college buddy, a former private investigator. I need the truth, I said. Matt. He hesitated. You sure about this? Some things, once you know, you can't unknow. I'm sure, I said, more sure than I've ever been. Rick took exactly 7 days. On the 8th morning, he asked me to meet him in his old gray pickup truck, parked a few blocks away from the newsroom. I stepped inside. Rick was silent for a moment, then opened the glove compartment and pulled out a thick envelope. Marriott Hotel, Santa Clara, room 608. They were there for 3 hours. A lot of laughing. I flipped through the photos. Allison, she was smiling brightly, wearing sunglasses, a light scarf, holding hands with a tall, salt and pepper-haired man in a tailored suit. That's Grant Bennett, Rick said, executive editor of Bay Area Times. You remember the name, right? I remembered, very clearly. The ex she mentioned exactly 3 times in 22 years of marriage. Once, in a college story. Again, when she stumbled across an old article online. And the last time, in her sleep. She whispered his name in a dream. I thought it was about work. God, I was that naive. I didn't throw the photos. Didn't slam my fist on the dashboard. I just slid the envelope into my jacket pocket and felt something inside me go completely still. That night, I invited Allison to a therapy session with Dr. Bergman, our family counselor from years ago. Back when Emily was born. She agreed without hesitation. Maybe she thought I was feeling guilty. Maybe she believed I wouldn't dare bring it up. She must have forgotten. I built a company from nothing. When I commit to something, I finish it. The room was warm, lined with wood panels. A soft yellow lamp hummed above us. The ticking of the clock echoed like a knife against my ribs. Is there anything going on between the two of you that's changed recently? Dr. Bergman asked. I stared straight into Allison's eyes. You want to say something? She looked away. After a long pause, she whispered, I've been messaging Grant. I pulled out a photo, laid it on the table, said nothing. Allison's eyes widened, first with panic, then silence, and then, she exhaled. What she said next made 22 years of my life feel like one long, cruel joke. I think I've loved him all along. I was just trying to build a normal life with you. I nodded, only one thought ringing through my skull. I was the discount version of the guy who once walked away from her. On the drive home, neither of us spoke, no music, just the dry click of the turn signal and the wind slipping through the cracked window. Once we got home, Allison went upstairs and started packing. I stood in the doorway, watching her fold sweaters like she was getting ready for a weekend trip. So that's it? 22 years, all zipped up in one carry-on? She paused, holding a blouse, then turned to me. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. I didn't mean for it to be like this. But Grant's divorced now. I had to be honest with myself. And lying to me was just collateral damage? She didn't answer, just said, I did love you, in my own way. I scoffed. Your way was sleeping with someone else? The front door creaked open. Emily, our daughter, stepped inside. What's going on? Why are you both home in the middle of the day? Allison turned, eyes red but chin high. Sweetheart, we need to talk. And she told her everything, in her version. A romantic tale about reuniting with a long-lost love, and a flame that never died. I looked at Emily, waiting, hoping, but she turned to me. And her eyes, sharp and soft like her mother's, cut deeper than any betrayal. Dad, you've always been distant. Maybe Mom really does deserve to be happy. I froze. Not because she sided with her mother, but because she didn't even consider that I was the one being betrayed. I collapsed into the chair. No rage left, just an emptiness that no amount of words could fill. I didn't say another word to Allison after that night. I didn't blame Emily either. The silence between us stretched on like a winter rainstorm, damp, gray, and void of even the faintest hint of sunlight. 3 days later, I moved out, took only one suitcase of clothes, a wooden box filled with keepsakes from Emily, and my work laptop. I rented a small third-floor apartment overlooking Spring Lake, ironically. The site of the very first landscaping project the city ever hired me for. The place had nothing but an old sofa and a round table. But at least, I could sleep. There were no late-night whispers. No strange perfume lingering on pillows. No pitiful glances or sweet lies laced with guilt. The next morning, I walked into Rachel Klein's office. A friend had recommended her, said she was blunt, but decent. Rachel flipped through the divorce forms. You have assets. She has assets, but with the company's valuation, you're entitled to a large portion. I shook my head. She can keep the house, the car, the retirement accounts. I only want my company. And my freedom. She raised an eyebrow. You sure? After 22 years of marriage. If she challenges this, the court might force a 50-50 split. I smiled, thin and tired. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to sign. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Sonoma County Courthouse with a folder of paperwork in hand. Allison was already there, wearing a gray blazer, her face unreadable. Beside her sat a young, sharp-looking female lawyer. She looked at me, visibly shaken. I thought, we'd talk privately before court. No need, I said. Everything's already been said. In the private conference room. Her lawyer suggested dividing assets per standard legal guidelines. Rachel pushed a folder across the table. My client declines any claim beyond his company and what he's already taken. That's not possible. Allison burst out. You can't just walk away from everything. I looked at her, not with anger, just a weariness carved into every fiber of my being. You walked away from me long ago. Allison, I'm just returning the favor. Eventually, we signed. No arguments, no breakdowns, no tears, just the scrape of pens against paper and the judge's wooden gavel declaring, divorce finalized. I left that courthouse not as a husband, not as a victim, but as a man who had just let go of a lie too heavy to carry any longer. A week after the divorce, I returned to work. No one at the company knew what happened, except Rick. I handed him the Northside Eco Village project while I quietly redecorated my office. I repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, brought in some new plants. When I found myself trimming the edges of a small bonsai on the windowsill, I realized something. I wasn't at peace because I had healed. I was at peace because I knew I was standing at the beginning, not the end. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon, a light drizzle hanging over Spring Lake like a veil of mist. I was sitting in my office, eyes on a technical sketch, but my mind drifting somewhere between memory and the empty spaces life had left behind. The door creaked open. Emily stood there, no warning, no text. She was wearing an old hoodie she'd once stolen from my closet back in 10th grade. Her eyes were shadowed, her hair hastily tied, and in her expression, something broken. I stood up, heart pounding like it was Allison standing in front of me. But no, it was Emily. And there was no trace of blame on her face, only a trembling uncertainty, like someone who'd just lost her way home. Have a seat, I said softly. She didn't speak. She pulled out a chair and set an old folder on the table. On top was the house sale agreement. Beneath it, a letter from her mother. Mom sold the house, Emily said quietly. Didn't ask me. Not a word. I nodded. It's her right. The house was in her name after the divorce. But that's my childhood. She said, it's where you made me breakfast 1,000 times. Where you built that wooden bridge in the backyard. Where you marked my height on the kitchen doorframe every year. Her voice cracked. I looked away. A few more seconds and I'd have broken. 2. I opened the drawer and took out the small wooden box, the only real thing I took from that burning wreck we used to call marriage. I opened it. Inside were Emily's baby tooth, a crayon drawing of our family, her 3rd grade Father's Day card, and a tiny jar of soil, from the spot we buried her hamster. Captain Fluff, in the backyard. I slid the box toward her. I didn't keep the house, but I kept what mattered. Emily broke into tears. After a while, she looked up, her eyes still red but her gaze clearer. Dad, I found Mom's journal. She kept writing to Grant, even when she told you she'd cut it off. You knew? I nodded. I knew. She wrote that you were the safe choice. That she built a life with you for stability, not love. I let out a dry laugh. No one wants to be someone's second option. Sweetheart. She wiped her tears, fell silent, then, almost hesitantly, looked me in the eye. Dad, if I wanted to start over with you, would it be too late? I didn't answer. I just walked around the desk and wrapped her in my arms. The arms of a father who had lost everything, and just found the one thing he couldn't live without. That night, we had dinner at a small steakhouse in downtown Santa Rosa, the same place I'd sat alone on the day I signed the divorce papers. But this time was different. There was laughter, shared dessert, and a conversation I never expected to have with my daughter. Dad, I think it's time we expanded the company. Sustainable landscaping consulting, green projects are in demand. And if we do it right, I believe Cole Landscapes can lead the way. I set down my wine glass and looked at her, truly surprised. You want to do it? I'm not asking for a job. I'm asking for a chance to build something from the ground up. I smiled, and for the first time in months, that smile wasn't bitter, it was real. 2 years after that dinner where Emily proposed the idea for Cole Environmental, I stood on the rooftop of Monroe Eco Center, the largest green commercial project in Sonoma County. Beneath me lay a rooftop garden filtration system, designed entirely by Emily. In the distance, the autumn sun dipped low over the vineyards, casting golden light across the hills. It was quiet, and I, Matt Cole, finally felt like I was standing firm on ground I had built for myself. You gonna stare off into the sunset forever? I turned. Julia Monroe, city planning director, with eyes that made everything feel like calm, was standing there, holding 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one and leaned against the railing. Your daughter's a genius, she said, smiling. This system has the city talking about using it for the riverfront redevelopment. I looked toward Emily, deep in conversation with investors and Ryan Johnston, our longtime client turned close friend. She wasn't the girl who once cried when her mother walked away. She was a confident, capable woman who reminded me, every day, that a life can fall apart and still grow back stronger. Julia glanced at me with warmth in her eyes. You know, I used to think after my divorce, I'd never love again. I smiled. I used to think that too. But some autumns are more beautiful than summer. Aren't they? She nodded, took my hand. Our fingers were cold, but my heart was warm. A few days later, I got a message from Rick. Just a news link, no words. Bay Area Times lays off senior editorial staff amid restructuring. Included, Grant Bennett. Below that, a small line. Divorced. Currently lives alone. I felt nothing but a deep exhale. Not pity, not satisfaction, just a realization. The past no longer had any power over me. I set the phone down and looked over at Julia. Coffee in the garden? I asked. You haven't seen the olive tree I planted last week. Only if I get to water it myself. She smiled. 5 years after the divorce, I threw a small party at my new home in Fountain Grove. Friends, coworkers, clients, and family filled the yard. Under strings of warm lights hung between trees I planted myself. I raised a glass and spoke softly but with steady conviction. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. Turns out, it had just begun. Applause. Julia squeezed my hand. Emily, now the executive director of Cole Environmental, stood beside her fiancé. Jason, the same young man she once introduced at that restaurant. As the night drew to a close, Emily found me near the stone wall at the back of the garden, the same place I used to sit alone for hours after the divorce. I wanted to tell you something, she said. I saw Mom again. She's back in Portland, teaching at a community college. Grant's gone, no one else. I nodded. Are you going to reconnect? I'll need time, she sighed. Some foundations need to be torn down before they can be rebuilt. I squeezed her shoulder. Whatever happens with your mom, you know where home is, right? She hugged me. No words needed. Later that night, while Julia was cleaning up dishes in the kitchen, I stood on the balcony, breathing in the crisp air. Not because it was cold, but because I realized my life no longer revolved around those who left, but around those who stayed. Julia stepped out, draping a jacket over my shoulders. Ready to come in? I took her hand and looked out at the lavender blossoms just beginning to bloom. I'm ready for everything ahead.